Hi, everybody. I'm John Self, and welcome to Self Perspective. Today, our guest is Mike Capps, and this is a pre recorded interview. As we move forward, I want to share with you one other important announcement, and that is this afternoon at 4 p.m., we're going to be doing an office hours, and the guest coaching session today, or the group coaching session today, will focus on decoding the art of the job interview. There is so much competition out in the executive and management level. And if you're going to succeed, you have to be the winner at the interview table. And we're going to talk about strategies to accomplish that today. So thanks for joining us. And now let's be sure that we're not screwing up anything with this new studio. And let's meet Mike Capps. Today, our guest is Mike Capps, a veteran news broadcaster and sports play-by-play announcer. Mike and I first met in the mid-1960s. He was the night police reporter, photographer for Houston's KPRC, the NBC affiliate, and I held a similar position, sans the CP16 movie camera, to record events. I relied on my notepad for the Houston Post and a paper that I left and then folded. In addition to his broadcast experience, Mike is also the author of two books, Grinders, Baseball's Intrepid Infantry, and The Scout, Searching for the Best in Baseball with Red Murph, a native of Burlington, Texas, a big city of 81 people in Milam County. Murph played minor leagues and got into the show for a while, managed a lot of minor leagues teams, and then went on to be a scout for the Mets. And I bet that's a great book. Here are a few Mike's accomplishments along the way. He was 23 seasons as the announcer for the Round Rock Express. He was a fill-in announcer on ESPN Radio. He led the AAA National Championship game in the broadcast booth on ESPN with Chris Chambliss, the color analyst. And in 2009, he was named the Minor League Broadcaster of the Year. Mike, thanks so much for joining us today. It's good to see you again. Let's begin at the beginning. Tell me about your early life. Where are you from?
I was born at Mother Frances Hospital in Tyler, Texas, December the 19th, 1950, right before Santa Claus. And I was raised in East Texas, although a lot of people in Fairfield, where I'm from, do not believe they're East Texans. I am here to tell you that they are, and that's where I was raised, and that's where it started.
Where'd you go to college?
Sam Houston State, but I went to Hill Junior College to play baseball before that, and that's a whole takeout story. I still have teammates, and we still get together, and it's they're just nothing like baseball people.
That's true. Tell me, why journalism? What got you? But where'd you get the bug, and specifically television?
It started with radio action, and it started when I was 8 years old, and there was a Braniff prop jet crashed in Buffalo, Texas. And all the news people from Dallas and Fort Worth and Houston came up to cover this. And my dad became best friends with a fellow named Eddie Barker, who was the news director at the CBS affiliate in Dallas, Bill Mercer, who is still alive at 98, who not only was a news reporter then, but also was the original voice of the Texas Rangers, the voice of the Dallas Cowboys for 10 years, the voice of the Chicago White Sox. And until about 5 years ago, he was still broadcasting games with me. Jim Underwood, Bob Huffaker, Wes Wise, who later became the mayor of Dallas, all those guys became friends with my dad, and they came down to deer hunt with him a whole bunch of times. And I got into that. They came to see me in school at age 8. And by the time I was 12, the Kennedy assassination had taken place in Dallas. And I had grandparents living there. And we had gone up to be with them for that weekend. And my dad called down to say hi to Mercer and to Barker. They said, "Hey, do you have Mike with you?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Bring him down here." John, I walked into a room about 50 feet wide and about 60 feet deep, and it was nothing but chaos, as you might imagine. Everybody was smoking in those days, throwing film cans, racing up to get the film processed, to get the video on the air. Mercer was doing live shots, the first ever live shots ever done in Dallas Fort Worth. They ran cable from the jail, the city jail, all the way down to the Channel 4 studios. And that's how they did the live shots. I was just mesmerized in that newsroom. I met Dan Rather for the first time. It was just so chaotic. We walk out, and my dad says, "You might do that one day." I said, "I'm going to be a baseball player." Kids from a town of 1,500, that doesn't happen for him. He said, "Just wait." John, 40 years and a month later, my dad died. And 2 more years and a month later, I read my first radio newscast on KHBR in Hillsboro, and I went on to KSAM in Huntsville, and that's what got me out of baseball and got me into the news business.
So you went to radio. Where was your first TV job?
At Channel 6 in Beaumont, the CBS affiliate, who was run, oddly enough, by a guy who had quarterbacked the same high school football team I did 10 years before me, a guy named Dave Lane, who later went on to run Channel 8 in Dallas. He was the president of WFAA for years and years and on the ABC Board of Governors. And we lost him 31 years ago to glioblastoma.
Mm.
And bless his heart. I mean, and he was just such a mentor, as was Mercer, as was Barker, as was Bob Huffaker. And it just went from there.
Well, let's pick it up. It went from there. Why don't you just briefly walk me through your history? We connected, we ran out into each other at KPRC in Houston. And I don't know how long you'd been there or how long you were on the beat. I got the impression not very long. I had gotten the beat at the Post because I had covered crime in East Texas. So walk me through from your time at Channel 2, where did you go next?
From Channel 2, and Ray Miller is one of the greatest news directors I've ever known. They had a new news director come in after he left, and they fired 17 of us on a Friday afternoon. I went from there to an all news radio station in St. Louis, run by a major corporation, and they had promised us all jobs for 2 years, and it went 6 months. But I will tell you, I'm still in love with all news radio. I think it is a pristine uh, way to tell news. Immediacy is just its calling, and I loved it. But I came back and worked at WFAA radio, then downstairs to Channel 8 WFAA TV, off and on for 10 years, with a brief time, about a year in management. I was the deputy bureau chief for ABC News in St. Louis.
Well, then I know you didn't you do some time at CNN and ABC, do some work for ABC?
I did. The ABC was a management job, and I became a correspondent just in time to go to the original Gulf War in 1990 at CNN.
So I knew you at news, and you guys were still lugging around those big cameras on your shoulder,
Yeah.
trying to keep up with Bob Wolf and Marshall Jard and Jim Priest.
Jim Priest.
Yes, a legend. Um, what captured your interest about being a play-by-play guy, and how did you get your first gig, and where was that?
Well, I'll try to give you a Cliff Notes version. I had played in college, had a chance to sign. Uh, that's a long story. I don't even want to get into that rabbit hole because it involves Red Murph, and God rest his soul, he just helped me so many ways. But I had done 2 seasons of home games at Sam Houston State, and John, the amazing thing about it, those games done live, the same skill set needed to do live shots at Channel 6 in Beaumont, at Channel 8 in Dallas, at CNN. It's the same skill set. And it was just an easy transition one way or the other. And then later on, after I left CNN, I transitioned right back after I wrote the Murph book. And it all just seemed to flow and in the
You
right direction.
you prefer baseball over football?
Oh my God. Oh, Baseball is a storyteller's medium. Football is a cluster to try to do it. And it's all in football. It's all about the analyst anyway. In baseball, I've had analysts. There's 64 ex major league players live within a 45-minute drive of this team I used to work for, the Round Rock Express. But it just you do enough games, and I did about 3,300 at Round Rock. It just becomes it's just laid out, and it just flows. That's all I need to all I can say about it. But it just grabs me every time I think about it.
So you've made several career transitions.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people who look at that, they'd say, my God, he's had to bounce around a lot, which is kind of happens
True.
sometimes in broadcast. But tell me what's been the secret to your success to be able to move and make some pretty significant career transitions.
I think having an open mind and knowing that well, with this latest situation in Round Rock, for instance, um, the guy who hired me was fired 8 years ago, and I was the last of his hires, and it just got to be time to go. And so I think over a course of time, when you've had multiple jobs and you've seen people get run off, seen people get fired, resigning as I did from Round Rock didn't come as any kind of a big worry because I already had two baseball jobs lined up. That said, I can understand why a lot of people think the transition from one job to another is tough because, I mean, if I'd had to transition from news to say being the PR guy for the fire department in Houston, Texas, that would have been a transition to me.
Let me ask you a question. Baseball and being in broadcast, doing play by play, the voice of a team is everybody says I want a full time job. I want that security. I want those benefits. I just got to have a full time job. But you in your career, you have parlayed a bunch of smaller jobs sometimes into more work than you knew what to do with.
Well, go downstairs and talk to Karen about that. Yeah. My wife. Look, here's the thing. Uh, the Round Rock thing came with benefits, and that was great. Most baseball jobs now, especially in the minor leagues, don't. And if they do, you're really lucky. So I just, John, I just have followed my heart and followed, as you know, well, I'm a man of faith, and I lay it out there and say, you got to help me find my way, and it works out. It's always worked out in my life.
But you've never been afraid of your life has always been about pulling things together. And so,
Yes,
what advice would you have for, our economy is changing dramatically
absolutely,
structurally, and not
absolutely,
politically, but structurally in terms of just in time jobs, temporary
exactly.
jobs, things like this. And I see that more and more. So, what advice would you give some executive who's nervous about, my God, I just need a full time job, about thinking about pulling other things together? Because you've done things, you were doing one thing and then go do something else that was kind of in the same neighborhood, but you probably hadn't thought about.
Skill sets. Sit down and talk to your wife or significant other or someone like you who understands careers and how they ebb and flow, and come up, figure out what your skill sets are. Number one. Number two, go someplace in a quiet corner. If you like red wine like I do, have a glass of red wine and chill, open your heart. If you are a man of faith like I, or a woman of faith like I am, just it's time to open up. It's time to realize there's a new world out there that is at your beck and call, and then figure out in your heart of hearts what you would do that would make you happier, that would make your family happier, that would make people around you that an aura comes around you when you get this way. When you have it in your heart, what you want to do worse than anything, the ways you can help people with what you want to do, go through all of that. And when you figure out what you, honest to God, really, really want to do, John, that's when the pieces start to come together, or they have for me at least.
Where did you do your first professional baseball play-by-play call?
This is so great. There was an old independent league called the Texas Louisiana League. And isn't it odd how Tyler has filtered back into my life? My first professional baseball game was an exhibition game, the Tyler Wildcatters against the Alexandria, Louisiana Aces in that beautiful park um, in Kilgore. And then the next game was at Mike Carter Field in Tyler. And that was against the Amarillo Dillas. And that was in 1996. And Bill Mercer was right beside me doing it.
He was an amazing guy. He went from the football booth. He was the voice of the Texas Rangers, and he
Yep.
even did wrestling from the Sportatorium.
Yeah, he did. And I'll tell you, he's still, uh, before his wife passed, he'd go to the grocery store and he'd come home telling her tales of people who recognized him. And he was already in his late 70s by then. And she'd go, just get out of here. I don't even want to talk about it. Well, they made a mistake one time of taking her book club to the sportatorium. And I don't think the people in the book club were exactly ready for what they saw, but
The
that's
Sportatorium was a sports arena, sort of roughneck cowboy bar, honky tonk. Did I
no
leave
air
it?
conditioning, by
No
the
air
way.
conditioning, so it was a sweat pool too, as
It
well.
was, it was. And those people sit in there and drink those $2 pearls and eat peanuts and scream and yell at Killer Carl Cox.
And who the
God
famous
rest his
wrestling,
soul.
the Von Erichs
On
and
Eric's. Oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So, what is life like? So you've gone from being on the network, where people think are big prestige jobs,
Mhm.
and you have a base, you're a bureau chief, or you're a correspondent with a network, and now you're calling minor league games. Tell me, what is life like on the road when you're working with a minor league team? Is anything about Burl Durham true?
Every single moment of it is true. Okay. Uh
One of the
the
great
last,
one of the great baseball movies ever.
there's no question about it. And I'll tell you a story about that, real quick one. The Dallas Fort Worth Spurs are the guys who flooded the field in Bull Durham. The fellow who wrote the screenplay was the second baseman for the Dallas Fort Worth Spurs, and they were in the playoffs. They were supposed to bus up to Amarillo and play the next day at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And these guys were worn out. They'd been in a pennant race that the Spurs had, and they get up there, and somebody said they had some beers on the bus going up, of course. And somebody said, "Let's get in a taxi. Let's go over to the ballpark." And they're going, "Why?" "We're going to flood the field." Well, I'll be, I'll be damned if they didn't flood the field, and they didn't play that day, so they got a day of rest.
But
It's
the
all
Spurs at the time were the minor league team in Dallas Fort Worth.
exactly right. Yeah,
Right.
right before the Rangers came.
There's more to showing being successful in the booth than just showing up to do a game. So tell me about what a routine day was like for you when you were out on the road.
Okay, that's easy. Um, Try to sleep till 7:38 in the morning. Up, out, and every place we went. I don't care whether it was in Double A before we moved up to Triple A. Uh, I always had gyms in every city where we went. So I'd go lift and then I'd find a park and run or walk. And by that time, I'm ready to go back, get some lunch, and start working on the 5 hours of prep it takes to get ready to do one of those games. That's just
Five
staying.
hours of prep. So tell me what prep's like.
All right, prep is a going over uh, the other team, making sure that you know what kind of hitting streaks a guy's on, or if he's struggling at the plate, what a pitcher's done, what the bullpen's done, talking to scouts about a starting pitcher that you haven't seen before, dialing them up. And gosh, my probably has 75, 80 scouts, and 50 of them are still working. And so it just it's so much fun, and I stay so immersed in it that time goes by, and you look up and 3 or 4 hours is gone, and you got to go to the ballpark, and boom, you prep some more and put the starting lineups in your book, and it's time to call a game.
So, if you were advising a room full of young broadcasters, people who, the wannabes who think, gosh, the coolest thing in the world would be to be a play by play guy. First question. Now, radio is still a big part of sports broadcasting.
Mhm.
How is that going to change over the next 5 to 10 years?
It's already changing. Two or three major league teams are not even traveling their radio broadcasters, which is to me is an abomination to the entire word of baseball. Because there are people who depend on radio and not on television. Not everybody can afford uh, the dollars it takes to get those games, the major league games, on TV. Not everybody can afford that. So what's your alternative? Well, radio. Well, you denigrate radio and you denigrate the game, but everybody's in that on that level, way up is too smart, and they already know that the radio means nothing when in fact it does.
Do they
And
simulcasting?
uh, they haven't started that yet, but and that just raises my hackles.
You know, the one thing I would say, the great Vin Scully, if you ever listened to him, it was hard to decide whether he was doing television or radio. I mean, he had his style, but he came up from the early days of radio and he just danced
Exactly.
with who brung him. But anyway, that's kind of
John, let me
sad.
give you a little. Let me give you a little. Let me give you a little treatise of that, because that I've done probably 40 TV games, and I'll tell you, I never varied one way to the other. I never just let things go. I'm always describing. You can see it. I don't care. Scully did the same thing. Ernie Harwell, who was a mentor of
Did the
mine,
same thing.
same thing. And to me, uh, Vince Scully never missed a game where he didn't tell one or two just knock you off your chair stories.
Absolutely.
Ernie
He's the
was the
master
same way.
storyteller in sports.
Ernie was the same way, except he had that southern lilt that Vin didn't have. But they were both great, and I never got a chance to meet Vin. I knew Ernie really really well.
Well, when I started paying attention to the Houston Astros, I went to a game when I was 13. And I sort of started listening to them. You know, I grew up in East Texas, and
Mhm.
KTBB carried the WCFL Chicago White Sox network
Yep.
gosh, the famous Astros announcer that died was in Atlanta.
Milo Hammond.
Milo, yes, and Bob Elston and Milo Hamilton from
Right.
WCFL. And when it was in Houston, I remember Houston had Gene Elston, and who could have held his own on any network in the world. He was really just
And
a
did.
yes. And then there was Lowell Pass, who was kind of a cornball. If
Are
he,
you chunking in there, John?
yeah, that's right. You know, if he knew baseball, he worked hard to disguise it. And I remember seeing on the Southwest Freeway, you know, when you went down into the canyon, there was a big lighted billboard, and all it had on it was Lowell Pass is bull. And the other one I saw, it's not baseball, but you'll appreciate this since you've had connections to Atlanta. There was a famous columnist, Louis Grizzard,
Hmm.
and Grizzard, funny guy. I mean,
Right.
he
Right.
sober or not, and had multiple wives. And so there was a big billboard in Atlanta that had "honk if you've been married to Louis Grizzard."
Oh my Lord. Have mercy.
So going back to your career, we started to talk about what advice you would give to young people who want to get into play by play, and what would
Okay.
that be today? Looking at what it's going to be in the future.
The one thing that I hear when I listen to the younger guys who still send me audio and who I hear in minor leagues and some major leagues, there's not a lot of depth. There's not a lot of authority in their voices or presentations. You have to grow into that, but you got to do it fast because it's there's you, John, as an aficionado of radio, and me, uh, we hear things differently than a lot of people do now. But an authoritative voice carries such great weight on radio. You can get by on television with not doing that. But on radio, you damn well better be able to be authoritative and know what you're talking about. And I just think somebody's parents must have told them, "Hey, you like sports. Why don't you try to be a play-by-play guy?" Well, okay, but man, you're talking about a slippery slope to start out with. And you better be ready to not make a lot of money. You better be ready to pull tarp on a field when the rain's coming down. You're going to be asked to do a whole lot of stuff mom and dad probably never asked you to do. And I just
And you
think you
got to
got to.
serve your time.
That's exactly right.
That's the
Exactly.
I think that's the one thing we learned in the news business, whether it was broadcast or TV. You don't start at the network. You start at some 34,000 morning newspaper in Tyler, Texas, as they like to say here.
Yep.
And then you have to go to Lubbock or someplace else. And, you were Beaumont, you were Corsicana and some other place. So you've got to earn your stripes. You got to work your way up. But in terms of academic preparation, is there something that you would say that would
Yes.
be, everybody says, oh, you want to take all the sports courses you can get? And I keep thinking, I don't think that's right.
No, 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 no. Bad, bad advice. Um, you can come back and work on a sports management, you know, degree or masters. You can get sports management masters now if you want to do that. You got to do the basics. You got to learn to speak the King's English correctly. You have to learn to write, and I mean uh, cogent, crisp, great copy. Why do you have to do that? Well, you know what? You're going to have to cut commercials. You're going to have to do some things that you're not accustomed to doing. And so, more depth, world history, world geography, know where places are. I can't tell you how many times I've turned on a young person's broadcast that they've sent me, and they have no more idea where some of these towns are, and they try to fake it. And it's learn what it is.
You can't fake it till you make it.
You cannot fake it. And even if you make it and you fake it, then you're going to get fired.
Well, somebody said something. Daniel Pink. I'm reading a great book that he wrote. He said, there's a survey that says that 1 in 9 Americans are in sales, and so are the other 8. And
Yeah, right.
when you
Yeah.
talk about what I do to do videos and try to connect with people to help them have a better career, what you do in the broadcast booth now in San Antonio and in Wichita, uh, you got to sell. You got to sell the excitement. You've got to sell the importance. You've got to sell the nuance. It's just so important. Somebody once said, I would almost rather hire somebody who had a liberal arts degree and knew how to write and knew world history and geography than to hire somebody who comes out and has experience, just sitting in the booth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because that person who is educated is going to figure the other stuff out fine. That's going to happen. But you got to be educated first. Look around us in this country right now. I can make you a case that the educational systems all over this country are nowhere nearly as rigorous or as important now as they used to be. And that I got gray hair, you got gray hair, but I believe that.
I'm a big follower of David Brooks, the New York Times, who's
Yes.
interesting guy. The Jewish faith is now an Episcopalian with my tribe, and he wrote a column. He said, we've been quick to say that liberal arts are dead, and he
Mm-hmm.
said, with automation and AI, liberal arts will become an essential part of your well-roundedness, if you will. And, as a great quote that was attributed to Mark Twain, he didn't say it, but it's a great quote. It's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so.
Amen.
So one last question, then I know you've got grandkids galore that want some of your time, which I think is great. Tell me, you have put together a career, and you've almost been a free agent
Mm-hmm.
most of your career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You've got that experience now, and you've been very successful. You have a great family, and you built a great life. Tell me share some advice with people because we're all going to be more free agents in the future. And
So
is there
that's
something
what
you can share that would help them see a path forward and have some confidence that, hey, this isn't being a free agent isn't the end of the world?
constantly reassess where you've been and every step of the way, what you have learned throughout those steps. And go back. I think I mentioned this earlier. Go back, sit down, and as the old guys used to say, cogitate over that. Think about it. If you're a person of faith, pray over it, and belief in oneself to me is the key to all of this we're strapped with here on earth. And once you can conquer that, you're going to see paths in front of you that you never knew existed, and people are going to come into your life that you wouldn't have dreamed would have come there. And I'm serious. I'm looking at a whole list of folks here. I didn't even get into half
I
of what I can list, but the bottom line is every step of the way. It's like the begats in the Bible. Um, Bill Mercer begat uh, the right school to go to for what I wanted to do, and how to do score sheets and how to really do that. I mean, Dave Lane, quarterback, same high school football team, blah blah.
uh,
And there
so
he is.
so networking has been a
Yes,
big part of your
absolutely,
success.
absolutely. You got to do it. You got to do it, and you can't. This is not for wallflowers. And even if you are a wallflower, take a big step because at the end of that, as uncomfortable as that might be, and it for sure is for some people, do it because you're going to go after it's over, and you've met some people that are starting to lead you in the right path. You're going to go, golly, gee whiz, I'm sure glad I did that.
Mike Capps, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed our conversation today. It's so good to see you again.
Same here, John.
We for what 2 or 3 years we tore around the streets at Houston between the ungodly hour of 5 o'clock in the morning to 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, seeing
Yep,
a lot. And I tell people, they said, "What was it like?" And I said, "People think crime today is really high, and it's not as high as it used to be." I
that's
mean,
exactly right.
I think I did a check once, and I think there were 500 or 476 homicides what my last year there, and I was on scene for 200 and something dead bodies.
My last year at Channel 8, at Channel 2, there were 800 murders in Houston.
Yeah. So the crime rate's down. Mike Capps, extraordinary broadcaster, baseball, minor league baseball broadcasting legend, and great friend, and somebody who is a great storyteller. We need to do this again and tell stories, because telling stories is kind of a lost art. And I tell my clients that if you tell a story in an interview, people will remember that.
No
If you
question.
just give them
No
facts,
question.
they probably won't.
That's it. But well, that's a guarantee. That's a guarantee. I've got a boatload of funeral home stories, man. My old man was an undertaker, and it's quite interesting.
Mike Capps, thank you
Anytime.
so much for joining us.
You bet.
Hi, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed that interview. Mike Capps is currently contracted to do baseball up in Kansas. He's finished up the season there at Wichita. He also calls baseball for the University of Texas at San Antonio. So he's a little bit closer to home. He lives in the Austin area around Round Rock. Great guy, great storyteller, knows so many people. And so I hope you enjoyed that. Now, one more time to remind you that at 4 o'clock this afternoon, we have a thing on office hours, a thing on our office hours group coaching session, which will be at 4 p.m. on the YouTube channel, Guiding Your Career, John G. Self, also on the johngself.com Facebook page. So I hope you'll join us there. We're going to be talking about how to decode the secrets to a good interview, how to elevate your interviewing game. There's so much competition in the market today, just unbelievable. And you may be competing against 100, 200, 300 people. The person that gets the job is not going to be the one that's the best qualified. Sometimes that happens about 30, 35% of the time. The rest of the time, the person who gets the job is going to be qualified, but it'll be the person who did the best job, who did the absolute best job at communicating their value. So we will see you this afternoon at 4 o'clock on the office hours stream. And until then, stand by and we'll see you then.